It's me, I'm back. It's been some time since I posted a video, but it's never too late. So today I'll be looking at this paper, Lower Bounding Klondike Solitaire with Monte Carlo Planning. This paper is by Ronald Jarnason, Alan Fern, Prasad Adepalli. So a brief about this paper is that it tries to do two things. First of all, it presents Klondike as a great environment for probabilistic planning. Second, it tries to come up with algorithms that would work on this environment. So why Klondike is the first question that comes to mind. So one of the reasons is that no one has actually looked at it, and Klondike is very popular. At least, well, at the time the paper was published, it was very popular, and it has certain properties which is very hard for probabilistic planning. They try to come up with a lot of things. The first one is that they try to extend their existing algorithm, which is for some other variant of solitaire, to be useful for the Klondike version. And well, the result is called as HOP. HOP is a framework, hindsight optimization, but it is what basically they're doing, so they just call it HOP here as well. The second one is, at the time, we must understand that the game of Go was solved by UCT, or at least got great results by UCT, which makes that to be a good candidate for this work. Finally, now we already have HOP and we already have UCT, and the results were quite convincing, and there are certain properties or disadvantages of HOP which were not there in UCT, and UCT also suffered that there is a saturation factor, that even though I'm trying to do UCT again and again, the performance is not improving after a while. But that wasn't the case with HOP. So in the end, the authors thought that something of the kind which uses HOP UCT might be interesting. So they made HOP UCT. Next is, well, we already have UCT, so why not make an ensemble version of UCT? So they came up with this ensemble UCT. Now there is a trick that they use in HOP UCT, which basically makes the UCT in the HOP UCT variant a deterministic thing. So here it is deterministic. So because of this trick, HOP UCT is able to work. Now they want to relax this trick. To do that, they do some stuff and they end up with something known as sparse UCT. And of course, if there is a sparse UCT, we can also have an ensemble version of the sparse UCT. So these are the 6 algorithms that they come up with. Now before we go ahead, one of the things that's very important to look at is what is Klondike Solitaire and why is it a great domain? Okay, so to answer the question what is Klondike Solitaire, let's suppose that this game is solitaire, this here in this image. Now there are 3 parts to it. First part is known as deck. The second part is known as the foundation stack. The third part here is known as the tableau. I always get the spelling wrong, but L-E-A-U-S, yeah, the tableau stack. These are the 3 parts of this game. Now the rules are something like this. The whole game is about getting all of these cards, which is this, all of these cards, all to these 4 stacks. However, there's a lot of catches here, but one of the primary catches is that each stack corresponds to a suit in the card. So this maybe is diamond, this is clubs, this is spades, and this is hearts, something like this. Now we know that what we want is all of these cards to go here. What we also want is that the organization of the card in each of the stack is sort of descending. It's like aces, then king, queen, j9, 8. Now the next rule is that in the tableaus, say it's tableau 1, there has to be only 1 card in it. In tableau 2 there will be 2 cards. In tableau 3 there will be 3 cards, 4 cards, 5, 6 and 7. However, only the top card in each of the tableau would be facing up. Every other card would be facing down, including the cards in the deck. Now the way in actual game we get cards from the deck is by asking for cards or maybe clicking on it, and what it gives is it gives out 3 cards at a time in this variant which they are dealing with at least, and only the top card on this triplet can be picked and used for the game. Now if you click again, you'll get another triplet, and if you click again, you'll get another triplet until the deck finishes. But the catch here is that you will always get the same triplet. So if you click and you get this triplet of king, j and queen of some suit or different suits or whatever, king of diamond, king of j of clubs and this of hearts, then this will always be the triplet that you get. So you can cycle around these triplets, but you'll never get a shuffled version amongst this triplet. So in some state, the situation would be something here as shown in this figure. Now again, I'll try to identify what the things were. So this is the foundation stack, or just simply the stack. This is the deck, and these are the tableaus, 7 tableaus. And here if you see, we have basically opened up the deck. So it's still in triplets, but only the top card is sort of highlighted and the others have been grayed down, which means that the only top cards here, which are in the light shades, can be accessed or can be used for the game. So the cards beneath them can be used only when you pick and use this top card. Okay, a couple of other rules are basically here in each tableau. What you want to do is place only the king first. So when the tableau is empty, only a king can occupy the first card as a first card here, and then the other cards can join in. Now if you want, let's say this is a king and the color is black. Now here you can only place a card which is smaller than this card. So it is a queen. I'm not sure whether you can do j or 10 or 9, sorry, j, 9, 8 or whatever, but well, it has to be a card lower than this king and of alternate color. So these are the two conditions: lower than the current card and of the alternate color, which is black in this case. So this is basically the rule. So a simple gameplay would look something like you move the king. Okay, simple gameplay would look something like you move this king here, and then maybe you can move this queen over to this king. So it'd be king, queen, and then maybe you can move this 10 to on this jack of clubs, and then you go on, right? So you organize all of these tableaus, and once you see that, well, something can be placed here because it's already in the descending order, then you just place it there. And as soon as all the cards are forming 4 suits in the descending order, you win the game. Now the paper talks about that the Klondike Solitaire domain is a great domain, as in it has face down cards, which is essentially something which wasn't seen by the authors in the previous papers that they did. And it's a difficulty, right? Because there are many face down cards. As you can see here, all of these cards are face down, so you don't know which identities these cards would take up, and that basically makes up the bulk of the problem that this Klondike Solitaire presents. Also, they also mention this small thing, or maybe it's a big thing, that there is no standard distribution of actions. I'm not aware of the PPDDL or probabilistic PDDL language. However, what they say is that outcomes for an action, if the distribution of those outcomes keep on changing, because in this case it's because of the identity of the cards, well, based on the identity of the cards, the outcome distribution of actions would keep on changing. This thing is unlike other probabilistic planning domains, which is why it's something that should be looked at by the people in this community of probabilistic planning. So what is the authors doing in this paper ultimately? So first of all, they are the first ones to try Klondike. This is one of the things that they boast about. Second, there are no benchmarks that exist. For this work, which is why they had to resort to using something like approximations of Las Vegas style, or the scores by human players from some other papers, or even they come up with their own benchmarks, which can be seen in this section. So how exactly are the authors trying to solve Klondike Solitaire? We know the rules, we know the challenges. One of the main challenges that we have to remember throughout is that Klondike has face down cards. So before we move on, one of the things that's important to know is that before this paper, the authors had another work which tried to solve another variant of solitaire, which is known as thoughtful solitaire. Okay, what is thoughtful solitaire? So in Klondike we see that there is this card which is face up in red, and then there are other face down cards beneath it. In thoughtful, the organization is the same, the goal is the same. However, all the cards, regardless of whether they are under some card or over some card or anything like that, ultimately all the cards are face up. So we know exactly what card is this, what card is that, and then this probabilistic nature of the game, it's no more there. Hence, what they can come up with is a deterministic planner that can solve this game of thoughtful solitaire. Now, if it were my work, then I would do something on the lines of what the authors tried to do, which is try to use, or at least reuse, their existing work on thoughtful solitaire to somehow extend for Klondike Solitaire. Because ultimately, see, the rules are same, the goal is the same, and what we all are missing is that there are certain face down cards here, which makes up, of course, the bulk of the problem, but they solve it, at least in the first attempt, by assuming that the face down cards are not actually face down. I'll just use a distribution of cards and sort of identify all of those cards. So if there were face down cards before, like here, what I'll end up doing is calling, let's say, hey, this card is not face down but is actually king of something. This card is not face down but actually maybe 9 of clubs or something like that. Now what it does is converts this problem, which is Klondike right now, into a thoughtful solitaire problem. Now we know that there exists a solution which can solve the thoughtful solitaire version, which is the author's previous work. And this is what they do in their approach that uses hindsight optimization. So what is basically hindsight optimization doing? So hindsight optimization will generate k such determinizations. So identifying each card, like naming them based on a distribution which is random in this case, is known as one form of determinization. Now we do this k times, so we basically have k states of thoughtful solitaire. All we have to do is run their planner k times, and whatever action their planner returns, we just average the results out and pick the best action based on that. Now the results show that, well, it works decently well. At least it beats the existing benchmarks or whatever they of 15% of human wins and around 20% in Las Vegas. So they beat at least those odds. Now there is definitely an issue with hindsight optimization, which they call as, well, the issue stems from it making use of correlated futures. Quickly shifting to this diagram, we try to understand what is correlated futures. So let's say there are two cards A and B, and we perform some action to make card A face up or card B face up. So let's say on the left side of the tree, we make card A face up and card A comes out to be king of diamonds, and the card B is still face down. On the right side of the tree, what we see is that card B is Queen of Diamonds and card A is still face down. So at this level, if we try to see what identities of A and B are, so A in some part of the tree has been seen to be King of Diamonds, whereas B has been seen to be Queen of Diamonds. Now let's say what we want to do is traverse further down on the right side of the tree and we turn the card A. There are two ways this card can be identified. First of all, the first way is known as correlated futures, and the second way is using the term known as independent futures. So in correlated futures, what would happen is that we will just reuse whatever identity of card A we know from maybe some other part of the tree. So card A would end up being King of Diamonds, regardless of where it is open, because it has been identified as King of Diamonds at least once in the remainder of the tree. The other way is every time we query for, hey, what is card A, then the simulator or whatever our mechanism of identifying cards is, then it would just return a new random sample every time. This basically says that the identification of card A on this side of the tree and on this side of the tree have no relation between them, which is why we say that this is independent futures. Now the authors present a good example of how this independent future things is causing an issue. However, I'm not entirely sure how exactly hindsight optimization is at fault here. It's probably because I am not that aware of the theory behind HOP. But to see the example, let's say we are in this state and there are two actions that we can take. First is bring this King of Diamonds onto this spot, and second is bring this King of Clubs onto this spot. We can bring either of them. It turns out that let's say the algorithm chose King of Clubs for some reason. If King of Clubs is brought here and the card underneath is revealed, and let's say it's to be King of Spades and this is the state, then it turns out that all we can do in this state is just take a random guess. And the problem here is that let's say our guess is to move this 10 of hearts over to Jack of Clubs. It turns out that this new state that we got here, it's a lost game. There is no win from this point on. However, you cannot blame the game for it, right? Because had we chosen the King of Diamonds here in this place instead of the King of Clubs, we have a sequence that the authors point out here which is able to solve the game or at least get a win. All happened because hindsight optimization just assumes a determinization and proceeds using that idea. Hence, this is why the authors call that HOP is optimistic. Well, on the other end of the spectrum is to not determinize anything, which is exactly what UCT does. Well, in some way, I think the motivation to choose UCT was its popularity at the time, and it makes sense to do that. However, the authors give a reason, which is that UCT explores the state space or explores the search tree intelligently, and it can make use of something that we discussed, which is independent futures. So let's suppose this is the tree we're talking about, then at every step, the UCT doesn't need to already determine what was the identity of this card. At every point when it needs to identify a card, it can just randomly pick something, which is the concept of independent futures and is used by UCT. I'll make a separate video or link something in the description for everybody to understand what UCT is, but the whole idea is that there is an intelligent notion to exploration of the tree. So basically at every point what we need to do is use this formula to take the next action. Now once we do that, we reach, so if we are in this state and there are a lot of possible actions, we use this formula and reach, say, this state. Now this is a new state, so what I can do is simulate using a random policy, and I reach many states. Some of them may be a win, some of them may be a loss, and I backpropagate these values to here. So these values of wins and losses influence this QUCT, and these other values are calculated. These are basically the number of times I've visited a particular state and the number of times I took an action on that state S. So this theory basically comes from the theory of bandits, and as I said, I can just link a video for everybody to see. So in the end, what we gathered from applying UCT is that something which is actually domain independent can be used to beat the existing odds, and it's much faster, whereas the hop implementation that uses the thoughtful planner was much slower, and it's partly because the planner itself was quite slow. Anyways, what we can do is try to combine hop and UCT. Why, you ask? One of the reasons is, as I said, UCT performance saturates with increase in the number of iterations, or trajectories as they call it in the paper. So UCT can perform very well, but there is a limit to its performance. However, on the other hand, the benefit is that it uses independent futures, whereas hop uses correlated futures. So an amalgamation of hop and UCT that maybe uses independent futures is something that the authors try to figure out in this section. Hop and UCT. So hop basically says, hey, we have several deterministic variants or determinizations. You run your planner or whatever and tell me what's the best action to take based on these K trees. Here what we do is we sample several trees. Now what we do is, on this set of deterministic trees, we will run a UCT over each of this tree. A neat trick that these guys use here is, let's say we encounter S comma A, and this transition leads us to S prime. What we'll do is, if this is the first time this is happening, we'll just ask the simulator. But the next time something like this occurs, we'll just directly use this mapping which we saved when it happened the first time, and we'll directly say, hey, S prime is the answer, and you transition to there in that tree. So the idea here is that sampling from a simulator is very expensive, and the results indeed show that there is in fact a speed improvement when something like this is involved. However, one more thing that is very important to note here is that this UCT is slightly different from the one that we saw in the previous section. This UCT in fact only samples the next state only once. So there may be many possible S primes which one can get to after applying action A on S, but we only care about the first one that we see. So in the results, one of the interesting things to note is that at 800 seconds, it seems that hop UCT is the best method. So around 800 seconds, UCT has around 35.47%, which is very high, and the closest is in fact the simple UCT algorithm with around 34% at 1000 seconds, and the second closest will be sparse UCT, which is using width 10. We'll discuss what sparse UCT is in a second, but it's very close in terms of performance and the time. The fourth algorithm to look at is sparse UCT. I think this is one of the main algorithms they try to push for, because they have a very detailed analysis of the bounds that this algorithm can give us. So what is the idea? We know that there is an algorithm known as hop UCT, which basically is, well, there are many trees like this which are K determinizations, and all of these trees use UCT. Let's pick one of this. So let's forget every other tree, and then there is one tree which is within the hop UCT framework, and this uses UCT, but a special type of UCT. Remember, here when I see a transition SAS prime, then I save it, and the next time I encounter SA, I just directly say it's S prime, even though we agreed that there can be many such S primes that I'm missing on. To be specific, it relaxes this constraint. So instead of saying that there exists only one S prime to the transition SA, there exist at most W such transitions. Hence, what they're doing is, for the first W times, if I see this transition SA, then I will just store the answer in my mapping. Once this has been done for W times, then Let's say we have a set of the ending states such as s prime 1, s prime 2, s prime 3 till s prime w. Well, of course it can be less than w. So if we have this set at the end